this is Mash It and Smash It, but you can call me Mash or Mash It for short. So now that I've counted down the worst animated films of the 40s, it's time to give my attitude a 180 and start looking at the best. However, as I said in my last video, there will be a twist this time. And that twist is that I will be doing two best lists for this decade. The first list that I will be doing today covers animated films from other countries, and the second will be covering films from Disney. The reason why I'm doing this is because, well, it wouldn't be fair. Let's be honest here, Disney pretty much dominates this decade. Sure, much of the decade was package films from them, but I didn't think they were all bad. In fact, there were one or two of them that I personally liked more than any of the entries from the list I'm about to give you. And this isn't a knock against these movies. They're all worth watching to some degree. But at the risk of sounding nationalist, I do feel that our biggest animation company in America overall had a much better idea at the time how to do a great animated film. Even when they made something marketable to make back some much needed dough, they put everything they had into it so that people can still remember it years later. To the point that Tim Burton's now directing a cash-in remake of it. Hey, I'm at least more optimistic for it than those other Disney remakes coming out this year. God, that Will Smith genie gives me the heebie-jeebies. Or the heebie-genies? Thankfully, the animated works of foreign countries will get better over the years, and soon we'll see plenty from them that can even rival Disney. Japan in particular remains to this day our greatest rival. In fact, you might see one or two movies from them when I cover the best animated films from the next decade. They just need a little time to get over their Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors funk. But for now, they deserve some recognition for what they accomplished in this decade of war and poverty. So let's give them the credit they deserve. These are the top 5 best foreign animated films of the 40s. Number 5. The Singing Princess. This movie is okay. Yeah, I know this is supposed to be a best list, but out of all the foreign animated films that I was able to watch with some kind of translation, there were only 5 in this decade that aren't already in my worst list. So my top 5 best are actually just the 5 that didn't suck. Anyway, some background. This is an Italian movie released in 1949 under the title of La Rosa di Baghdad, or The Rose of Baghdad, which was the second Italian film in Technicolor, the first being another animated movie that translates to The Dynamite Brothers, which I can't find anywhere, so we'll leave it at that. Dubbed into English 3 years later under the title The Singing Princess, they got a pretty notable performer to play the titular character. That's right, Julie Andrews, the future Mary Poppins, Maria von Trapp, and the Queen from the Princess Diaries. This is the movie that introduced her to the world, and due to her star power, the film was reissued in 1967 at the height of her career, with her name plastered all over the advertising. So, how did she do in this movie? She was alright. She was obviously very young at the time and was still developing. Her singing was still developing as well, hoping to one day not be so high-pitched. I'm sorry, I have a hard time listening to vocals like that. But, as it turns out, the titular character with the household name performer is barely in this movie. Yeah, she's not really the main character. That honor goes to this kid who, well, was not performed very well. Throw in some mildly annoying comic reliefs and a few entertaining villains, and you got yourself a passable, middle-of-the-road film. And isn't that all it takes to make this list? Regardless, there are also a lot of animation goofs in this, to the point that they're kind of the funniest parts of the movie. While I can't say this was worth purchasing the DVD for, it's not bad. Rather watch Mary Poppins again, because this movie is practically imperfect in every way. But whatever, it's fine. Number 4. Emperors Nightingale. This movie is from Can I just call it Czech? Created by Jiří Trnka. Can I just call him Steve? Created by a famous stop-motion animator whose name I can't pronounce, apologies, this movie is based on a story by Hans Christian Andersen. It's seen from the perspective of a boy who lives in luxury, but is cooped up in a mansion, unable to leave. One day, he catches a fever and dreams about a young Chinese emperor in a similar situation. Who knew fever dreams could tell such compelling stories? And that's exactly what this movie feels like, a fever dream. The animation is very simple, which was pretty much the animator's trademark style, but it does feel incredibly trippy at times, and the sound mixing isn't the best either. But despite all that, it is a compelling story, with a few interesting twists and turns. And to help it along even further, we have one hell of a narrator. Yes, like Singing Princess, this movie was dubbed for American audiences as well, and once again, they got a pretty big name performer to sell it. Only this time, he was already a household name. I'm talking about the man, the myth, the monster, Boris Karloff. I'm sold on pretty much everything he does. He has such a great voice that can range from creepy and sinister to warm and welcoming. His role in Mad Monster Party is a fine example of that. Of course, I still have 2 more decades to get through before I get to that movie. That said, hearing him narrate can give a bit of a Grinch vibe. Every person in the castle loved the mechanical bird a lot, but the emperor who ruled over the castle did not. Speaking of the mechanical bird, good luck getting its song out of your head. While I can't say this movie will go down as a favorite, it is worth a watch if you're up for the animation and audio I warned you about. But if nothing else, watch it for Karloff. Number 3. Alice in Wonderland, the 1949 version from France. Yeah, not to be mistaken with the Disney movie that would come out 2 years later. In fact, there were several legal disputes between Disney and the company who made this movie, but I'd rather not go into all those ugly details. Instead, let's talk about the movie itself. The film is a mix of live action and stop-motion animation, much like New Gulliver, with a live protagonist entering a world of stop-motion puppets. It was apparently shot twice in 2 different languages, one version in French and the other in English. Unfortunately, whether it be the reshoots or something else, this does lead to some choppy animation and some various goofs. The transitions are also very jarring, and for an adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, the pacing can get very slow. Kinda goes against the nature of the original story, something that Disney would capture much better 2 years later. But on a more positive note, the animation is quite nice despite the technical errors. There are still some nice effects for the time, and slow or not, it's a pretty straightforward retelling of the book. While there are several Alice adaptations that you would be better investing your time in, this one won't hurt to check out. Anything's better than the Tim Burton version, or its sequel. God, what mad, backwards world are we living in to get those adaptations? Number 2. The Lost Letter, an early film from Mother Russia. I actually don't have much to say about this one. It's a very simple story that kind of feels like a lengthy short. Doesn't help that the movie is less than 45 minutes long. Keep in mind that this was before every feature-length movie had to be around an hour and a half or longer. But overall, I don't really have any issues with the film. The story is effective enough, and the animation looks quite nice, by rotoscoping standards at least. And on top of that, it's short enough that you don't have to worry about taking too much time out of your busy schedule. If you have 45 minutes to spare, feel free to check this one out. While Russia had some superior films to come over the years, this isn't a bad one to precede them. And that's about all there is to say. And the number one best foreign animated film of the 1940s is The Humpbacked Horse. Another early film from Mother Russia. It has the most complex and compelling story out of all the entries in this list, with a protagonist that's just likable and endearing enough that you want to see him make it out okay. And the titular humpbacked horse is quite lovable as well, not to mention badass. Oh yeah, and all of the dialogue is in rhyme. Yes, both the Russian dialogue and the English subtitles are in rhyme. It's like Dr. Seuss, but with hostages and a brutal kidnapping. I'm not even joking, the whole story is about the main kid being forced to perform near impossible tasks for a corrupt czar, and at one point he has to kidnap this pretty maiden by straight up sacking her. But it's okay, they never bring it up again. That makes it all better. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't say this is perfect. But out of all the entries in this list, this is the one that I feel the most willing to watch again. And I very well might, as the same director and studio would remake this almost 30 years later, almost like an updated version of the movie. While similar, it still counts as a separate film, therefore I will surely cover it as I progress through the 70s. So if you have about an hour to spare, feel free to check this movie out. Will you regret it? To that I say, nay. And those are the best foreign animated movies of the 40s. While they're all admirable efforts, they still don't quite measure up to what America was doing at the time. But give them time. Soon we'll start seeing much more greats from them that are on par with their American rivals. But for now, join me for my next list as I cover the best animated Disney films of the 40s. Right now. Number 5, Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Number 4, Dumbo. Number 3, Bambi. Number 2, Pinocchio. And number 1, Fantasia. Yeah, I really didn't have much to add to what I already said in my previous reviews. The only entry I haven't reviewed yet is The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. While it may be inferior on the simple basis of being a package film, it is easily the best of the bunch, with 2 very strong segments, especially Sleepy Hollow. That segment alone makes the movie worth watching, with some fun and bouncy songs by Bing Crosby, great atmosphere, and an intense chase scene to cap it all off. Of course, there's plenty to enjoy in the Wind in the Willows segment as well, with some strong narration by Sherlock Holmes himself, Basil Rathbone, and plenty of likable characters. And then we have the other package films that I haven't talked about yet, Make Mine Music and Melody Time. Both do their job perfectly fine and put together a pretty fun collection of musical shorts. And finally, the sequel to Saludos Amigos, The Three Caballeros. I pretty much sum the experience up as this. Yeah! I don't want this party to end! Oh my god, I want this party to end! Yeah, there is a lot to enjoy in this one, from the animation to the music, but it does become a little too much by the end. Still, I would recommend it nonetheless, so long as you heed my warning about the last 20 minutes or so. And that about wraps it up for the 1940s. Let's see what we have opening up the 50s. Ah, Cinderella. Okay, that's a good one to start up the decade. But I think I'll have plenty of time to praise it when I do my next best list. So what comes after? Oh... Ladies and gentlemen, do I have a treat for you in the next episode. Until then, this is Mash It and Smash It, signing off.